Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today on digital designs for residential landscapes. My name is Laura Bucci, and I'm the marketing specialist for the landscape industry here at Vectorworks. Before we get into the presentation today, let's review a few quick housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded, and the on-demand version will be emailed to everyone, as well as posted to Vectorworks University. In the chat, you will see a link to a short 10-question quiz that you can complete during or after today's presentation to receive your continuing education credit. Please create or sign into your Vectorworks University account prior to completing the quiz to earn your certificate of completion. Shortly after passing, you will receive a confirmation email. Additionally, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to enter them in the questions box, which is located right in your control panel. We will save time at the end for live Q&A. And last, please take a moment at the end of the webinar to fill out our survey so we know what you would like to see in the future. This course is registered with LACES and APLD for continuing professional education. Vectorworks is an approved provider for LACES. As such, it does not include content that may be deemed or construed to be an approval or endorsement by the LACES or APLD. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. We have Garth Woodruff, PhD candidate and designer at RootBound, and Foster Woodruff, associate designer at RootBound, joining us today. Let's give Garth and Foster a warm welcome and get started.
Hi, welcome to RootBound Studio. We appreciate you coming and joining us for this webinar, and we're going to take a little bit of time and go through our process. My name's Garth Woodruff, and this is Foster Woodruff. And in our studio, we team up on our designs, and in our webinar, we're doing the same. But first, I'll give you a little bit of an outline of what we intend to talk about today, some of the points we hope to stop on. Of course, you can drop questions in the question portal throughout, and we'll answer those during or after. But we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, go over our design workflow, a little bit how we build that into CAD and how we integrate CAD and other software pieces into our design process. And then we're going to take a look at a handful of case studies in the end of it. But first, to give you some concept of the type of studio we are a small residential landscape design build company. We do a handful of other mid-size commercial projects, but our niche really is kind of highly detailed residential resort spaces of some sort. We operate our business in Southwest Michigan, which happens to be across the lake from Chicago. And so the majority of our clients are second homeowners and are coming to their spaces fairly specifically to relax and spend time with family. But we do carry a passion of functional design, and our clients, I think, engage in that. I'm Garth Woodruff in the top left. I also happen to be a professor of environmental and landscape design at Andrews University. So I split my time between the studio and the university. My wife, Lonnie, is my partner, and she carries the majority of the load of clients. And then we've got two associate designers, Foster Woodruff, who's with us here, master's degree in landscape architecture from Michigan, Lance Johnston, bachelor's degree in environmental and landscape design from Andrews, and they've both been with us for a couple of years. And generally, we've had some other interns and people come and go, but generally, this has kind of been the team that has carried the workload of what we're going to talk about today. So what we do, not all of our projects are necessarily high end. I don't think that's necessarily entirely our focus, but we certainly focus on thoughtful designs and clients who want to engage in something that's a little bit more than down and dirty with cookie kinds of stuff. And we do focus a lot on the design process. And at some point, maybe this is a good time to talk about it, maybe a little bit about our journey, that how we got to where we're at. Early on, Lonnie and I had a design build company. It was in Northern Virginia. was before I was recruited to teach at the university, and in our design build is a very fairly specific niche, I think, in the design world. We felt that we were using our designs to sell jobs, and I think that for most of our clients, it was actually a pretty good fit. But it got to a point where we didn't feel as professionals, just ourselves, that we were engaging in the process to the extent that we wanted to, versus using a design for sales. Instead, actually taking a lot of time, breaking down the nuances and the details, getting to know the clients quite a bit better, and trying to focus intentionally on fairly good or specific design results. So when we were recruited to come up here to teach, and we rebuilt our business model, we did so fairly purposefully. And I think it's reflective in our work. It's certainly reflective in our enjoyment of our work and how we engage. And so you're going to see, and maybe we're a little bit of a unicorn in the industry, because there's a lot of very large landscape architectural firms. There's a lot of design build firms, and there's only a handful of designers that are kind of smaller boutique design companies that just do design, that don't really get out into the trucks and get crews out on sites either. So I think you'll get a unique perspective of what and how we do things, and it happens to be a good fit for our team. It happens to be a good fit for our region. And so let's just first unpack our typical design workflow. And eventually we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of CAD, but we use CAD in our design workflow uniquely. As a matter of fact, this picture of Lonnie is a perfect example. We're actually using colored pencils and we're using hands. And so we do, in our typical workflow, actually use a variety of mediums to get to where we're at. But these 5 steps is kind of typical. The 6th step would be project management, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we kind of break our process, and you can take a look at our website. We show our process on our website for clients to get a better idea what to expect. But we break it up into 3 basic steps. The first step would be basically 1 through 3 here. We do a pretty intensive client interview. We have a couple of questionnaires. My research in grad school had to do with placemaking, the human connection to places and spaces. And that's very tactile and very personal. And so we use the questionnaires to maybe break a few of those barriers without getting too personal and into their real lives. But we use it to open the door to ideas and open the door to needs. So we've got a questionnaire that we do ahead of time that also qualifies the client. And as you guys are designers, you understand, you get a lot of calls, but is every call also a good fit? So we use our little phone interview, and we send out a questionnaire that has a handful of questions that helps us get a better feel for what we're getting into. And then we also have a questionnaire that we use sometimes on site, but we have on-site follow-up questions. But it's all of the basic things you would expect. I mean, there's budgetary questions, there's utility questions, there's what do you want, what do you vision this space to be, other basic questions, how many family members, how often do you use the site? And then we get into some of the more tacit ones, like tell us about your favorite landscape that you've been in, or tell us about the last house that you lived in. What was the landscape like there? How did you like it? Try to build some perspective of who they are generally. And then of course we do site visits, and actually in today's modern era, the site visits are almost an anomaly. I mean, we do go to the site visit where we do inventory and stuff, but a lot of our first meetings are on Zoom, with our clients being second homeowners and primarily working in Chicago. And that's not our only client base. We work all around Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois. A lot of them we might meet for the first time on Zoom. People have gotten a lot more comfortable with that, but we go through some of the similar questions that you would typically go through in any kind of residential landscape interviewing process. I feel like this is one of the areas that we've gotten better at as a firm. And some of that also goes back to this idea of moving from design and build to design, to strictly design. We focus quite a bit on some early site analysis. What's the new tool that we?
So we've started to incorporate real survey equipment, which is we use a tool through a company called MLID, and we have the MLID Reach RS3, and we actually found out about that company from another webinar, and from a guy, Joe Hanauer, his company's Landscape Architecture LLC. He's out of Wisconsin, but we kind of picked up on a little bit of the information he was talking about and using site surveying equipment and starting to utilize that and how we create our base maps and doing some of our topo maps and our initial beginnings to concept design.
Yeah. And that's been an ongoing struggle for us to find just the right piece of equipment. And for us, this works. And so there are some very elementary versions of something that will take measurements and elevations, right? What's what we need is ground measurements and elevations. There's some elementary versions that sometimes were cumbersome, but were cost effective. And then and I was talking to a colleague that is a designer in a large firm in Chicago, and he's got a guy there with a $30,000 piece of equipment, and all he does is site surveying. And we're just not that firm, right? This was something that met in the middle for us. So mid-sized residential design build. And then we've used it a number of times because it's accurate enough to, like, for instance, this site right here, that's technically a wetland, right? Beyond the bulkhead. And we were able to measure the exact height of the water. We know what the mean high water mark is right now. And we could actually plot out this project knowing that we would be outside of a wetland, safely outside of a wetland. So we've been able to use it to not only assess sites, but also kind of confirm specific details that we needed to know. And then that gets dumped directly into CAD.
Yeah, so that survey tool, you're recording your data on an app, and then that app will export all of your points or lines as a DXF file, and then you can take that file and directly import that into CAD to kind of help create your site surveys and that base map.
So we see the site, we inventory the site, we inventory the plant material on the site. We've got a handful of websites, which I'm sure many of you do too, where we pull up online data. Soils data gets pulled up for every one of our projects. Because of the region that we work in, we take a look at either critical dunes or wetlands to see whether or not we're going to cross over into those and what we have to navigate with the client to get there. And so then that's kind of the first step in our design process, is taking a look at the site, gathering information, getting it into CAD, dumping all of the data from the internet that we find also into some layers. We'll show you some of those so that we've got layers and pieces of visual information. In addition to that, we have a kind of like a photography system, I guess. Like for instance, on residential homes, we take pictures from the house out all the way around the house, and then from the outside of the house in all the way around the house in order, so that when we're back in the studio and we're like looking through pictures, we can hit the right arrow button and have it click, 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 click through the house. We also do drone shots now, and you can get a drone for like $600 or $800. And to get drone shots is like very often to be like, oh yeah, well, we can't quite see where the AC unit is, and we're wondering how far that sticks out, or sometimes those like far away pictures give you a completely different perspective of the space. And then I guess for marketing purposes, it certainly gives you a really nice before and during and after.
And it's also a big quality bump up from just looking at Google Maps.
Yeah.
Or Google Earth or any of those.
Yeah, we were working on a project close to this one, and the artists that we were working with were using Google Earth, which was maybe a year old. And we were in the middle of this conversation. We were like, well, we've got a bunch of analysis information. Let's take a look at it. And we dropped our drone shots on, which were real time. And that real basic step in things made them go, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is totally different than what we expected it to be. So it's a fantastic tool for communication, both for ourselves as designers, as well as those that we're engaging with. So step 2, site analysis. In that site analysis, if it's a typical residential site, it's going to have a house and some property lines. We might have some setbacks if they want a swimming pool. We'll obviously talk to zoning and people like that before we get to this. And then we sit down with copious amounts of information, actually right here on this table, right here. I'm sure that that picture was taken right here on this table. And we do a charetting process, which those of you who are familiar with it, you know, charetting is just basically these fast creative work sessions. And we do it as a collective group. So often it'll be Lonnie and I where we do the charetting. If not, it's her on her own. It kind of depends on what kind of project it is. And very often there might be more than one iteration of charetting. So we sit down with real pen and paper. We print off a base map with all of the information on it. We pull up all the pictures on this monitor right here. We pull up their information on their questionnaire and our notes. And in part of our early process, after we have that first interview, we'll create a design program and we'll send it back to the client. We'll say, this is what we've heard you say. These are the pieces that you want to be involved. And then they agree, and that's what creates this early contract or early agreement. So we'll pull that up and we'll take a look at all the things that we know needs to be incorporated. And very often, also during this process, we have a photo sharing opportunity where we use HOUZ, H-O-U-Z-Z, right? Is it H-O-U-Z-Z? Mm-hmm. And we set up idea books and we'll put pictures in there and the clients will put pictures in there. And this picture thing is happening during the 3 or so weeks that it takes for us to get measurements and get back and put them in to CAD. And so we sit down at the charrette process with information, you know, maybe pictures that they emailed us or pictures that they put on a house that says, this is the feeling that I want from the space. This is a type of fire pit that I want from the space. We read through their criteria. We take a look at the soils data. And then our goal is to try to basically be a creative conduit for all of these different parts and pieces. And because you can come up, you know, somebody says, I like this, and you can come up with 10 ideas that fulfill what they want or what they like. We often come up with multiple ideas. So in the shredding process, we'll do something and then we'll slide it to the side and then we'll sit there and draw a second idea or a third idea. And sometimes one really stands out and we might want to hang on to it. Maybe one stinks and we throw it away. Maybe one has one piece that we like. And we try to get to a point where, would you say we have at least 2 or 3 concept ideas for almost every project, right?
At least 2, oftentimes 3,
right?
Different concepts, yeah.
Right. So we'll try to get to a point where we have a semi-refined organization of space. No real details. We haven't decided on if it's a dogwood or a redbud yet. We haven't decided on, maybe we know that it's some kind of a stone patio, but we haven't pinned down exactly what it is going to be yet. And so we come up with these like conceptual charrettes, 2 or 3 on paper. By the way, probably the funnest part of our job is the 15 minutes that we get to do this every week. And so we come up with those ideas and then we shoot it back and then we generally team up. So it's, you know, a couple of old folks and then a couple of young guys. And I think that's very relevant to this CAD conversation. You know, Lonnie and I have dealt with grumpy clients for 30 years now. We've become better at it. These guys are digital natives, right? And they're pretty good at that. And not only that, I think that we also bring different creative perspectives. We've got a creative perspective that might be framed by long ideas or might be muddied by ideas. And these guys bring ideas that are creative to the table that are going to either add to that or straighten us out a little bit. So we have a tendency to team up. Depending on workloads, it might be like, hey, we've got this project. We do a Friday meeting and we start to pass these pieces out. Foster might be teaming up with me on a project, or I might team up with Lance on a project. So we get to the shredding process and it's 2 or 3 of us that are involved in that. And then it gets pushed to one of the associate designers. So they've got these drawings. I'm sure we've got piles of them laying around in here. And they start to put them into CAD. And that's what creates this initial concept design. And they'll have 2 or 3. We'll take a look at a couple case studies that will be a better description of what that is. We review that with the client. Obviously, there's edits. They might be like, oh, well, now that I know what that looks like, I really want to change this. Depending on the project and the budget and the level at which the project rises, we might do some 3D renderings, we might do some elevations. It totally depends. And I'll be honest, I think I'm an old school visual person, and it comes very easy for me to see something on a piece of paper and understand what it's going to become like in a 3-dimensional real world. And I have a lot of clients that go, yeah, I get it. And then we show them a 3D drawing and they go, oh, now I really get it. And the whole process, they'll never push back. And then they see the 3D and they're like, oh, let's make this change and that change. So the 3D is really good for us as a design tool to understand ourselves, what we're seeing, what things get in the way. It's also a really good tool to help a client understand the breadth of the concept. And then at that point, we'll usually pause, build some cost perspectives, get a feeling for, of course, when we get client feedback, we've got 2 or 3 ideas. They always gravitate to one. They might gravitate to one and then want to steal something from the other. So that's part of that editorial process, is taking the one that they like, refining it, making the edits that they want, and getting this concept to a point where it's like, yeah, this is what we want our backyard to look like. At that point, that's when we get into the nuts and bolts. How is this kitchen going to get built? It's going to be built out of steel framing. Is it going to be a stainless steel kitchen? Is it going to be a brick kitchen? What kind of countertops? What kind of backsplash? And if they say, yeah, we want to do the kitchen, we know it's going to be $45,000, $50,000, let's go with it. Then we start getting into CD sets. And just like any other architecture firm or landscape architecture firm, our CD sets, we try to be as comprehensive as we can be. We usually find more things in that process that's going to cause us to edit or change things. And so the CD set is for us to really refine a detailed concept into real measurables that not only edit and refine our own design process, but then give us a tool to communicate to contractors so that we can say, here's this kitchen, what's it going to cost, when can you do it, that type of thing. So then with the CD sets, because a lot of our clients happen to be in second home situations, we also do quite a bit of project management. So they don't, some of the bigger projects we have, there's carpenters, there's masons, there's pool people, there's HVAC gas guys, there's electricians, there's irrigators, there's landscapers. They don't have the time and the energy to deal with that many contractors, find them, know whether or not they're good or bad. So one of the things that we offer is we take the CD sets, we put them into scopes of work, bid it out, help them choose contractors. And then we're not a general contractor, but we do project management, make sure that it stays on track, make sure the contractors are doing what they're supposed to be doing, follow up on quality control, answer questions along the way. There's always editorial stuff. And project management is one of the bigger pieces of what we do that consumes a lot of our time. So our goal is to create amazing spaces that are client-centric. We really like engagement of our clients in the process. We encourage multiple conversations. We build multiple avenues for them to engage, whether that be through pictures or emails or on-site meetings. We help them choose craftsmen because the goal is to have a fine looking result that somehow is on budget. So how does that look like in the CAD world when we narrow it down and isolate it to a specific step in that process? This is what it looks like. Oh, I'm supposed to talk right here too. Whether you're using AutoCAD or Vectorworks or any of the other types of CAD software, there's a few things that are the same. We were going to mention AI right here too, weren't we? Yeah,
it's a parallel.
It is a parallel because we were talking about this ahead of time, and I was saying, I remember when CAD first came on the market. and was more readily available in the market space in like maybe the 90s. I started to learn CAD at the University of Maryland in the early 90s. Computers were slow and laggy. In the marketplace, most people were still doing hand-drawn. And it got to a point where kind of like CAD and its affordability and technology caught up with the marketplace, and you started to see it being used a lot more on in every day-to-day studios and firms. And the ideology from the client was interesting because they were like, oh, CAD is going to fix everything, right? Like you don't even barely have to be a designer. I'm not even going to hire a designer because now I can draw it myself. And I don't think for a number of years, people outside of our industry were really putting together that it's like, well, you can do a garbage design and put it in CAD, and it's just going to be a very clean, straightened up garbage design. And they weren't necessarily realizing the value that we bring as practitioners and how space is organized and how elements work together. And how much more thoughtful it was than actually just drawing something on a piece of paper. And so Foster mentions, he's like, yeah, that's kind of like AI. I think there's a lot of concern about AI taking over the creative world. But I don't think AI is going to interview the clients in the same way, suss out what their sites look like, bring multiple ideas to the table, have continued dialogue with the client. I think AI is going to be a tool that we use, but it's only likely going to take over the design projects at the lowest end of the scale where people don't care. I think that we will always have good, informed clientele base that sees the value in what we bring. And so this is how we use CAD. We use CAD as basically a really elaborate organizational tool. It's helped us in our editorial process instead of redrawing things. And really, the design is still something very tactile and important as part of our process. And this is how we use CAD to organize.
So, like Garth has been saying, I mean, we primarily use CAD just to get our designs into an organized state. And we're barely touching the surface on what CAD or Vectorworks, that's the software that we use. We're barely touching the surface on what Vectorworks can do. I mean, we're using 5% of what the application really offers, but we're using it in a way just to organize our designs from conceptual ideas that are on paper to a physical drawing that has accurate dimensions and accurate construction drawings can actually get built. So a few of the tools that we kind of live in Vectorworks is our sheet layers and our design layers. And so we've set this up in a way where every time we open a new Vectorworks document, it defaults to this template that we've created. And that's by creating a template in Vectorworks and then saving it as the default .sta. And then you'll put that file, that .sta file, into your Vectorworks library. And then every time you open a blank document, it'll come back up with all of these organized layers and different objects we have on sheets for organization and for creating schedules for plans or for landscape elements, etc. So we're heavily organized in our sheet layers and our design layers. The sheet layers that we have set up go from 1 through 10. We pretty much use all of these layers for every client. It kind of depends on how large of a project it is, but they're pretty much always going to have a master plan, a planting plan, and usually a landscape plan. It depends if it's a high enough scale. If they have a pool and a patio, we'll get into hardscape. A lot of times clients will want lighting. And so that's kind of what we have set up. We have 1 through 10, going from our conceptual master plan all the way down to 9 and 10, which is our construction details. And
so we've set this up very specific for our firm. So like if you were a firm that did a lot of parks or a firm that did a lot of like playgrounds, you could set this up specifically for yourself. So this is very residential
Yes.
backyard design
Yeah.
specific. And I'm wondering if you should explain the difference between sheets and layers.
I'm getting there. Yep.
Okay.
And so like he said, I mean, this is tailored exactly to what our clients are, which are primarily residential, high-end backyards. So those are our sheet layers. The design layers is actually where we're going to be drawing and translating those charettes that we talked about earlier into actual line work that can get dimensioned out for practical installation purposes. The design layers we have kind of in terms of hierarchy. So on the bottom right-hand side here, you'll have plat maps. So oftentimes we'll start working with a client, they'll already have a plat map from an architect or from a surveyor. And that's a great starting point for us to kind of build off of. If we don't have a plat map, oftentimes that will get replaced with a drone shot, like we said, or a Google Earth image if we don't have any drone imagery. And then moving from there, we'll have the base map, and that's kind of our actual measurements that we're going to do on site. So we still use our surveying equipment, which is that MLID product that I was talking about earlier, but we'll still compensate a lot of the house measurements with traditional, tapes. One caveat of the MLID surveying equipment is that it has to have good signal and it has to have a good sight line to satellites. So oftentimes if you're using it in close vicinity to a roof line, that roof line is going to block the signal and you won't have an accurate point. So a lot of times we're still using tape to get as accurate as we can for those base maps. And then moving up from there, we'll have existing site features. So a lot of times that's, existing bed lines, shrubs, trees. And then we'll have a couple of conceptual design layers. And then moving on from there, furniture, planting plans, lighting, hardscape, grading, utility, and then our construction details. And those are kind of all planned out so that they lay on top of each other nicely so that objects aren't hidden throughout the design process. So this is what one of our typical sheets looks like. This is our master plan. And this is the title block that we have set up for each one of our sheets. And inside of this title block, we have obviously, your typical elements that go inside of any architectural or landscape architectural title block, the client, the address, the partee, which I think Garth is going to unpack a little bit, and then what designers are working on the project, the date, contact information, and then a scale bar north arrow. Pretty straightforward stuff. But one thing that we do that's kind of special to our process is choosing a partee, which is kind of like the overarching design goals or soul of the project.
Yeah,
say.
I like soul of the project. In the architecture department at the university, they use. I'll give you like this glass could be a partee. I'm going to build a building. And I'm going to find inspiration in this glass. And it's going to be a cylindrical building, and there's going to have angular architectural features along it. And every time I think about how am I going to address things on this building, I'm going to think about it as this glass. Like maybe there's something inside that has a glass wall. Maybe the elevator's round. So a partee can be a physical object. And sometimes I think that commonly in architecture that has been the case. But it's really a descriptor of a feeling that is overarching an architectural project. So we use words as our partee. And sometimes they stick, sometimes they're really fun, and sometimes they fizzle. But it's kind of cool. Like, so for instance, we had one project that was like this point of land out in the lake, and they had these young kids, and they really wanted to be playful. They were putting a pool in, they had a boat, and we ended up calling it Resort on Point. Because it was on a point of land. And it was very resorty. That was the mood of the project. Party garages, boat lifts, things like that. And a year later, they sent Lonnie a text. They're like, hey, you guys should come down and take a pictures of Resort on Point. It's looking really good. And like they had picked that up as basically the name of their property because it engaged so much. It doesn't always engage that much, but we've got East meets Midwest, and East meets Midwest is just like it sounds. It's like East as in Asia, right? And it's Midwest. So it's this Asian themed space with meadows and Chinese red Tories and moon gates, and then on this flat native meadow that's kind of surrounding this contemporary house. So that's what we do with the parties. It's basically for us, it's a wordage that is trying to create a concise sense of our goal in general. And it's whimsical and fun. So, so that's what the party is. And then every project has a name at that point.
And in our case studies at the end, those both have parties, which will explain that process a little bit more. So on each of the sheets, we have kind of like a built-in set of rules. That way, all of our design sheets kind of stay consistent in terms of aesthetics. So on the top left up there, everything that's in red is kind of like what the rule is for the viewport that's going to go into the sheet. So for instance, on the master plan, this is saying that layers on should only be the base map and the concept plan and the planting plan, if applicable. Oftentimes when we're doing a master plan or a first rendition of a concept, we won't even have a planting plan. It'll just be kind of general massings of spaces. So hardscape spaces, soft spaces for plantings or for lawn. And that's kind of what the master plan would look like. And then all other layers are off. And so we kind of have these rules set up for each of the different sheets. That way, you know, our hardscape plans are always looking consistent and we aren't getting distracted by, you know, colorful plant symbols that shouldn't be on a lighting plan or a grading plan. So here is the landscape plan. This is showing some of the different schedules that we have built in. So these are obviously templates that are part of that default file. And then when you start a new project, you'll come in here and you'll edit, you know, what the top dress is, if there's any site furniture, and then what construction details correlate to those call outs. If it's top dress, or maybe we have a fence detail that would correlate to the call out for the fence schedule. So a few of the tools that we have started to incorporate into our process, a great one that we like to use is the plant tool. So that helps us to ensure that the plant species that we're installing are spaced correctly based on, you know, maturity or 3/4 maturity. And oftentimes Vectorworks has a lot of different ways you can insert plants, but you can base it off of specific spacings, and then it can auto-generate schedules for you. We also use the stake tool, which is a big thing in creating these site models, which has become even easier with our site surveying tool, the MLID product. And so you'll have these 3D points that have a Z value attached to them, and that's used through the stake tool. And if you select all those points and you go to landmark and you go down to create site model, and then from source data, you can create this 3D topo map, which gives a good visualization on grading and the topography. And then resource manager is another great one that we've been using a lot, just to, you know, place furniture and symbols, and they're also great for creating that initial 3D model so that clients can better visualize what their space is going to look like. So to recap, we use CAD and specifically Vectorworks to, you know, take us through our entire design process, really from concept to those final construction drawings. It helps us to ensure uniformity so that everything looks the same, we're staying consistent, and it also provides a pared down set of tools and guidelines, like I said, that's specific for our needs. Every firm and company will use CAD in a different way to suit their specific set of goals, and that's kind of how we use CAD for ourselves.
Case studies. All right. We've got 10 minutes to whip through some case studies. We have comfort zone and we've got paradigm shift. These are the two that we're going to kind of pop through quickly. Comfort zone, residential backyard in need of complete redesign. They wanted a pool, jacuzzi, patio, fire pit space, special needs swing. So that's part of where the party comes, is the comfort zone. She had an autistic child who was a little older, like maybe in his mid to upper teens. And like anybody who has autism, different stimulus affect you differently. And we were trying to create this comfortable space as well as have some playful things that were built for a big kid, right? Paradigm shift is a set of deck steps going down a hill to the lake. So here's comfort zone early on. She had a big messy backyard, lots of hillside issues, fairly tight space to squeeze in a swimming pool, which the pool contractor didn't catch. So we had some edits to deal with. And then on the right here is an example of like what our design elements to address would be. This is what we would call our design program. This is what goes after we do an initial interview, after we have some back and forth and some questionnaires. We summarize it, we send it out. I think couples therapists call this active listening. This is what I heard you say. Yes, that's what I said. So this is what a design might look like early on. A big messy backyard with a whole bunch of goals. We start with a base map that has a handful of elevation shots to give us some concept for that conceptual design process. We did a couple of ideas. So this one has a big round walkway. The pool is square to the house. Have it like an upper green lawn behind the pool. The fire pit is there off to the left. And this might be what when we go to our first presentation meeting, this is what one of our boards looks like. So we use pictures from either their house ideas or from our own research to say, you wanted a swing, how about this as a swing? So we use random pictures to specifically evoke the direction we're heading with the design. So this is board number one, concept number one. Concept number two was much more angular. The walkways were angular. It ended up creating more dynamic spaces and broken up pieces. So the back had some outdoor rooms. Again, we still end up with an elevational change. So now the fire pit is behind the pool up on a hill that goes down. And this is what that first concept board would talk about. This is how we see the spaces moving around. We've got plant symbols in there, but we don't know if they're going to be what kind of red twig dogwood they are yet, right? It's to give us this editorial step, one step closer. And then like this picture in the bottom here where it shows like the upper patio and the pool flow that's kind of what the setting is of their backyard. All of them, their backyard with the hillside, all of it has this like raised pool idea. This is what it starts to look like after we've gone through some edits, right? We're now, okay, we've got a pile of rock in the backyard. You probably saw in those early pictures. Let's turn that into some gabion walls. If the fire pit, why don't we just use gravel for the fire pit to save some money? Let's use a natural matrix type planting. And so this is getting us a little bit closer. This is what a grading plan might look like. We've got a handful of elevation shots, the coping height. We've got a channel drain in this. Where is that channel drain going to dump off to? So we're dealing with all of the drainage and the elevation in a grading plan. A hardscape plan is going to be the specific callouts. It's this kind of brick laid in this kind of pattern. In this case, it's concrete, and the concrete has cut joints going a certain way that we're going to be specific about. And what kind of stone is around the fireplace? What kind of edging holds that stone in? Those are all the things that we start to unpack in the hardscape plan. And then the planting plan, again, it's almost like the charetting. It's kind of the fun part. Most of us here, I guess all of us, our undergraduate is in horticulture. So all of us to some degree have as strong of a connection to horticulture as we do design. So the planting plan is the fun part. Lonnie does a lot of those in the office. We acquiesce and allow her to have that fun since she's the boss. And then you can see like some no-mow lawn. We have a call out for some no-mow lawn areas at the bottom of the drawing. And that's because it was a difficult spot. Nobody was going to want to get up there and maintain it. But having some green space behind the walls was a good idea. Utility plans. So a lot of our projects are utility heavy. You know, where's the emergency cutoff for the hot tub? How do we get power out to the hot tub? Where is the plug to plug in the pump that sucks the water off the pool cover? So we end up doing some kind of utility plan, gas, electric, low voltage, things like that. Little keypads to open and shut the pool cover. courtesy outlets for charging phones, water for the shower, whatever, right? Lighting plan. So all of our drawings get a low voltage lighting plan. It really adds a lot to a space. It's not just safety, it's like major ambiance. We add that to most of our projects, especially if people are hanging out there late in the evening throughout the season, stretching out as much of summer as they can get. Pool going in. We had to move it a couple of feet because he bought the wrong size pool. Gabion walls and we had two different types of wall systems going into this. One to hold up the fire pit, you can see in the left-hand picture. And then it's mixed with some Gabion walls where we did like a dot dash type of thing. Up behind the right-hand picture is where that no-mow grass is. Here's what it's starting to look like when it's wrapped up. So this is their backyard finished up. When we finally got the hot tub activated, she took a great selfie of her and the kids in the hot tub and sent us a thank you, and that's always rewarding. But you can see we gave the place, there's the before, there's the after. We gave it a pretty good facelift, and the angular walkways are a little slower to go through, but add a lot to the spaces, I think. So it's really pretty cool. There you go, another before and after. Paradigm shift. We have a great house. The lake's up and down. We've got a revetment, but we don't get to get all the way down this hillside of the lake. Can you please give us something beautiful down at the bottom of the lake? Major hillside issue. Did quite a few measurements in order to get our elevations just right. They wanted a beach down at the bottom of the hill. They wanted to have something of a cabana, but we really couldn't build a full cabana, but we wanted to make some attempts at giving them some cabana-like feeling, even though it was just 5-foot wide walkways. This is an early concept. You can see really some of the changes are just kind of like nuance. We ended up with a bench swing idea so that they had a landing. It's not safe to go straight downhill. So it's important to kind of go down and zig and zag and have some opportunities to take a break. Walking back up this thing, you need an opportunity to catch your breath. And we wanted to turn those into opportunities. And because of the slope, like this middle area, you could get on this bed swing and actually look out over this lower deck area that has more activities for beachside types of things. Some of the early precedent pictures, we did like a little bit of an idea board and an imagery board and said, here are the things, this is what we see it looking like. It can't have walls, but maybe we can do louvers, that type of thing. We can't have a lot of floor, but maybe we can put a hammock in there that's permeable so that the dune can still be safe underneath it. So these were some of the ideas, and like this billowy one to the right with the curtains flowing in the breeze. The owner was like, I love that, but I don't want any maintenance, and I'm not collecting them off the neighbor's property. So we moved with these pictures to more and more long-term stable materials. This is what it ended up looking like when it was all said and done. Again, kind of like a layout plan, a utility plan, because they had a lot of utilities, and all of their utilities got hooked up to their Control 5 system in the house, Control 4 system. They got radiant heaters, sound system, all sorts of stuff going on that made it pretty cool. Lighting plan, the low voltage lighting plan on this project is gorgeous. It just really lights the hill and the woods up. It's just really beautiful. The swing was cool. They worked with the interior designer of the house. She would come out and visit on a couple of the meetings, and she had a connection of a custom swing builder. So instead of just buying one off the shelf, we had it built, and then we had this custom swing built, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a big queen size bed, so it's not just a little swing, right? It's something else. And then Foster did these amazing renderings. So this is, you mocked all of this up in Vectorworks, but you didn't use Photoshop for these.
I was gonna mention that. So the basis of this starts in Vectorworks with kind of that site model that I was talking about earlier. But to kind of punch it up and make it look more lifelike, we use a rendering plugin for Vectorworks called Twin Motion. And you can actually work hand in hand inside of Vectorworks and see real-time updates inside of Twinmotion. So you can kind of edit the actual structure itself in Vectorworks and kind of see those updates happen in the rendering software. So they play really nice together. This is a little fly through of what the finished rendering looks like.
So Twinmotion gave the opportunity, kind of like Photoshop, to punch it up, but also the ability to do fly-throughs.
Yep.
Right. Which is pretty cool. Matter of fact, I don't mess with Twinmotion. That's not my niche here. But from what I sensed, once you do the work in 3D in the CAD software, this part was reasonably.
It's fairly simple, you know, it's applying textures, getting lighting right, making sure.
Yeah, all of the shading is geo correct.
Right.
Yeah, so that it's like you could stop that and you can say that's 6:45 at night on July 4, which is very informative from a design perspective and also cool for the client to see it. All right, let's. There you go. We've got another one or two of these.
One more fly through.
And then we'll get out of here. We're almost on time even. The queen size bed was not white. It ended up being this awesome royal blue as kind of a punch color. Glass railings just to make it feel like it's big, even though that's just a 5-foot wide walkway. And then a little bit of the outdoor lighting that we were anticipating. The structure is Structures, Struxuers, or however you spell it, which is a louvered mechanical structure. The deck is Ipe. And let's see. No, keep going. Yeah, here's a handful of pictures of it during construction. We're not really allowed to show pictures of that by the client, so we'll go through those quickly. And I'll just finish with this. We'll turn that off. This is another one of our projects. Collect the pictures with our own drone at the end of it. Obviously, we are the benefit of informed clients and a beautiful setting with Lake Michigan. So, you know, our work is 40% of what makes this beautiful. And there's my wife and my niece. And we are lucky to get to engage in this industry and in this region and really enjoy what we do and have refined it to make our jobs a little bit easier using the software we talked about today. And now we can open the floor for questions.